Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here. It is Thursday, August 24th, 2023. On the update today, we have a lot to talk about here. We've got Franklin, which will become a hurricane. It looks like a pretty substantial one, more than likely staying out in the open Atlantic between the eastern part of the United States and Bermuda, but it will bring impacts by way of swells and eventually some rip currents. We're going to have to talk about that in the coming days. That's going to be a problem. It really will be, especially with people still going down to the beaches. We need to address that. And maybe some impacts for Atlantic Canada. Don't know exactly which areas yet, whether it be Nova Scotia or Newfoundland or both. And then we're going to be really watching the Western Caribbean, a very unusual setup, almost like October would be with the Central American gyre. Very complex terminology there that basically means we're seeing an October pattern with August water temperatures, and that could make for a very interesting and problematic time as we go through the next several days. A lot of uncertainty, as usual, especially this year, it seems. So let's get started, shall we? Good to have you with me. Let's start at the National Hurricane. Actually, I forgot, and how terrible of me to forget. CJ made this graphic. I want to make sure I showed you. Do you remember this? I do. I was a couple years into college and was not sure if I was going to do music or weather or something in between. Anyway, I remember Andrew very, very well. The coverage of it was like extraordinary. Yes, that was 31 years ago today. A lot of people have gotten their start in tropical meteorology because of Andrew. Sometimes in weather, it's a blizzard in the Northeast, something like that, right? Something that triggers your interest in weather. This really solidified it for me that I switched over from music to geography, studying weather and climate. Andrew was the catalyst for that. It really was 31 years ago today. And as you see here in the infographic that CJ made up, it led to a lot of changes, and we have seen those changes help in future since Andrew hurricanes, right? But still we're battling storm surge and flooding problems. That's a big reason why we are working with the company out of Rhode Island, Quick Dams, to use technology and water to fight water. But Andrew brought about a lot of changes in structural building codes. Now we have to tackle dealing with water, because I've said it before, water made the Grand Canyon, for goodness sakes. It can affect us. So a lot of changes since Andrew, but we still have a lot of progress to be made. And we might be dealing with some action in the Gulf of Mexico, maybe for the Florida Peninsula area over the coming days. Let's drop me out so we can focus on this. Here's the map. Pretty active out there. We've got Invest Area 92L, or AL92 as it is more properly known, I guess. And then we have the remnants of Emily. These two areas, they're just non-issues except for marine interest out here. We never say that they're not going to affect anybody. There could be ships out here, even planes flying overhead. They have to deal with that convection. But for land areas, no, these are not a problem. Franklin, though, affecting, even if indirectly, the Turks and Caicos down here, forecast to move into the Atlantic, become a hurricane. I believe this will become a major hurricane. I've just seen it too many times. When these systems move out of the deep tropics into the subtropics, down here the conditions are marginal, sheer, dry air, all kinds of other hindrances. That'll probably change, and I think Franklin becomes a major hurricane somewhere in this region up through here. I'd venture to guess it gets up to 120, 130 miles per hour, something like that. Maybe a Cat 4. Wouldn't surprise me at all. And when it does strengthen and really gets its act together, it's going to start sending out those swells all around the Atlantic over here, and those will eventually reach the coastlines of Bermuda, even the northern-facing beaches of the Greater Antilles and elsewhere, the Bahamas, eventually Florida through the Carolinas and the rest of the East Coast. And yes, swells and rip currents are an impact. They can take lives. So please, in the coming days, as we get to the weekend, I know that's just a couple of days away and it might not quite ramp up then, but next week, you got beach time out there, even just an afternoon, and you go down to the beach, those swells coming in, the surfers are going to love it, but it's a big danger, neck and back injuries, or the worst case scenario, drowning in the ocean there as an indirect result. It's almost a direct result. I mean, Franklin caused the swells. People get impacted by it. Maybe it should be a direct result, but that's not my decision. I'm just making you aware of it because it is a hazard, and it's better for you to be alive and watching these videos than not. Really? I mean, yes, of course. Shows you I care about you. All right, then the other area we need to watch, not an invest area yet, probability now up to 60% that this will go on to develop. Quite the split in the models, if I've ever seen it. The GFS, basically, nothing there. Other models like the European, the ECMWF, really painting the picture that this could be a big problem for somewhere along the Florida Gulf Coast, and then eventually maybe the southeast coast of the United States after that. So let's dig in and see what we know. There's a lot we don't know. Well, what do we know? There's the disturbance down there. Look at you can already see it. Look at the overall turning of everything down here. It's all already turning. The energy is there. The atmosphere is already in motion. There is convection and vorticity. The seeds are there. It's a large area. It's going to take some time with these Central American gyres. Gyre, by the way, G-Y-R-E. A gyre, right? A large turning something. And in this case, it's the atmosphere. And that Central American gyre setup, Philippe Papin down at the Hurricane Center, he'll do an analysis on this, I'm sure. His infographics are amazing. I'll actually ping him and ask him if this does qualify for a true CAG event. That's just all scientific stuff. For us, for you, for me, and Floridians possibly, right? And elsewhere down here, it matters as to what could come of it. And that's what we're going to look at going forward. This is Franklin over here, gradually getting better organized. The pattern will change. And as I said, I think this becomes a major hurricane somewhere in this corridor right through here. There's Bermuda. Bermuda will be on the east side. Yes, there will be some big wave action for Bermuda. And depending on how large this circulation gets, maybe Bermuda gets some tropical storm conditions. We'll have to wait and see. There's still plenty of time to watch that evolve. In the eastern Atlantic, here are our other systems. As I said, for our interest over here, these are non-events for us. And then nothing really to worry about off of Africa anytime soon. We're going to have our hands full with this area, plenty over the coming days. Water temperature profile real quick. El Nino still cranking. Look at the cold wake left by Hillary. Amazing that the hurricanes take energy out of the ocean, and they take that energy, they turn it into energy that is dispersed by all that convection, and then they move it poleward, but they also are efficient removers of the upper oceanic heat content, very important drivers in the Earth's overall climate, or at least on a year-to-year basis. But look out in the Atlantic. This is still, I mean, we're only at August 23rd on this map. Today's the 24th, of course. We've got a long hurricane season in front of us with plenty of fuel for these systems to take advantage of. Now, this is really important. That's what we need to watch. I showed you the satellite imagery, the loop there from Tropical Tidbits. This is the vorticity signature. There is energy. That's the vorticity that we look for. The seedling is there. It's not like there's nothing there, and the European and the Canadian and other models that develop this are seeing something that isn't there. We have the potential energy down there, and that's what we want to watch. Does this rotate around and then start to fester somewhere in this area where water temperatures, the upper ocean heat content is there for this to go on to develop? And then, of course, looking at the Gulf of Mexico, if this thing gets started in this vicinity over here, you bet, as it moves into the Gulf, plenty of very warm water for this to take advantage of. The warmest that I have ever seen it on such a large scale. 30 to 31 Celsius, we're talking upper 80s. That could be very problematic, not just from the potential intensity. We do get a lot wrapped up in that, and I understand, and I do sometimes myself. How strong is it going to get? But all of that water, the warmth of that water could lead to excessive rainfall as well. And unlike Harold, I got to keep up with these, that was moving very quickly, this one, and if it does get a name, by the way, it would be Idalia or Idalia. I got to look at the Hurricane Center pronunciation. We'll just call it Idalia. It'll be moving a little bit slower, hopefully not too slow, and it's going to be moving around a break in the ridge instead of, and this is what I was talking about earlier, an October-type pattern with an August everything else. One thing we're not seeing is a huge front coming down scooping this thing out like Ian last year and Wilma in 2005. Big, deep troughs carved in and lifted those tropical cyclones out. This system would more or less follow a weakness in the ridge somewhere in this vicinity, it looks like, coming around the backside of the Bermuda High and the big giant hot dome of high pressure sitting over the nation's midsection. Not a super deep fall trough. It's just different the way the mechanics are. So again, an October setup with an August everything else, all the other ingredients that can lead to big problems in the month of August. All right, here is the GFS, because I do want to look at Franklin first over here, especially for our friends up in Atlantic Canada. All right, Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Let's move this out over the next several days. Then we will address the Caribbean potential system. Franklin gets its act together between Bermuda, as you can clearly see there, and the eastern part of the United States. And then it comes up around that ridge. And you can even see at this level, 5,000 foot level of the atmosphere, 850 millibars. Kind of a weird looking shape to the ridge, but there it is, big old bubble of high pressure over the Atlantic. And it goes around that. There is some troughing down here, but it's just weak troughing. It's not one of those big old, hey, 50-degree weather's coming in troughs like we see later in September and beyond. In this scenario, 162 hours out, let's just call it a week, it does impact potentially Newfoundland. But that's a week out. A lot could change. It could be more to the west and impact Nova Scotia more directly. It could be closer to Newfoundland directly. We need to watch that for our friends in Atlantic Canada. And then, as I said, as it goes up here, really intensifying over those warm waters of the Atlantic, a favorable pattern overall. It will send out swells towards the east coast here everywhere, and that's going to be a growing concern that I will address as we get closer to that happening. Now let's back this up to the starting point, change our domain over here to the western Atlantic, and let's see, what does the GFS do with, and look, you can even see it. Look at the turning of the wind barbs here. There's your gyre set up down here. Cyclonic rotation. There's your little pieces of vorticity in here, your little pieces of energy. The question is, will something consolidate, take over, and head off towards the Florida Peninsula or somewhere? And the GFS basically says, no, I don't think that's really going to happen. Kind of stays shredded and stretched out and so forth. And you can see that here at 114 hours, roughly 5 days, the energy is dispersed over a large area, not bundled up like Franklin. And there's, what is that, 92 probably coming back to life there? Yeah, that's bundled energy. That is not. So the GFS says rain, stretched out, not a big problem, no worries at all. Then you look at the euro. This is what we call the euro fast, EC fast. Let's see how far the ECM goes. It's gotten out to 90 hours. Let's just see that, because this is important. So the European shows that energy down there, and that matches pretty well to what we see here. And you see, there it is, that energy there. This is the analysis from the European. It does show up pretty well. So it's got the initialization correct as far as I can tell. So let's just scroll this out and watch what happens. It does focus that one piece of energy there. This is 48 hours out right now. There you go. It starts to focus around the Yucatan. Now let's just look real quick. You see where it is. Let's go look up above in the upper levels of the atmosphere. At 200 millibars, got to scroll it so it matches up. Bingo. That's the big area of high pressure sitting over the top of it at the upper levels, 200 millibars, ideally favored underneath that anticyclone aloft. The difference, though, watch this. Let's go back to the GFS, and we scooch it up. That also has the same thing. So that's what I wanted to know. It's like playing detective. Do things match up? Do things meet the profile? Profilers work on that in the FBI and in local crime labs, right? Do certain things meet a certain profile? There's ways to look at stuff. Science. This says the pattern is there. The GFS matches it. The European matches it. It's the low levels that are not jiving between the models right now. That's what I see. The upper levels match. That is a very favorable upper level environment. Look, There's outflow over here. You got this upper level low sitting over here, favorably ventilating it. Classic setup. Last year, a couple different people really picked out the pattern ahead of Ian. They said, boy, the Gulf of Mexico is ideal for a major hurricane. Several days later, we got a major hurricane. You look for the pattern. Does the pattern make sense? And in this case, it does. So that is why I think we're seeing, among other things, why the Hurricane Center has taken this to 60% probability. You understand? That's why. It just makes a lot of sense there. So let's go back to the Euro here and go back to the lower dynamics and let's see what happens. So we got it out to 48 hours. Let's go to 72. By 72 hours, it's just sitting there, but it's starting to organize very slowly, and then it starts to move a little bit, and by 99 hours, we have the start there. This is Monday afternoon. First of all, look at Franklin sitting there. That is a pretty formidable tropical cyclone in the model field. Let's take a look at this parameter. I think it's this one. Yeah. So we're looking at 973 at the surface, and that's getting it. That's a solid hurricane, 1,004 at the surface here for our system in the Caribbean. And just moving this out further, if we look at the EC Fast that Levi has set up for us here, Dr. Cowan, we go to 96 hours, finally at 120, and then at 144, 991, don't laugh and be like, come on, Mark, that's nothing. The models are not good until something really gets going. Then we start looking at the hurricane models, the HWRF, the HAFS. This is telling me we need to look out. And you say, well, it's just 991, and there are some hurricane winds in there. That's a very surge-prone area. Just a Category 1 into western Florida, especially if it's intensifying, that can be very problematic. Please do not focus on pressure and category and then make your decisions based on that. We need to see if anything even develops, and then we worry about what the impacts are going to be. And you guys should know very well, maybe not up in that part of Florida because you've been escaping these calamities, lucky for you, but surge, and freshwater flooding issues if it's not moving very fast. It doesn't even matter. You can get 5, 6, 10 inches of rain, and you can have localized flooding. So yes, this has my attention. It does finally move off into the Atlantic after this, and that could be a problem. Strengthening 988. So this goes by. Yeah, we got to watch this very closely. Out it goes into the Atlantic, and then it's just kind of sitting around there because something else is trying to come in and gum up the works. Remember yesterday's title? Tropical Shenanigans? That's what I'm talking about. There's so much weirdness going on, an October-type pattern that we're seeing in late August. Go figure. All right, let me get this online for you all so that we can figure it out together. All right, I'll be back tomorrow, certainly. Let me just get back on here real quick. I don't like just talking at you. We'll be watching this closely, of course. We got to wait and see what happens with the evolution of this. Obviously, the first part, pretty slow. A lot of people are going to get anxious. There's going to be a lot of, this and that thrown around out on the internet, I'm sure, social media. But just relax. Take the weekend to make sure your hurricane stuff's ready to go. Run over to the big box retailers down there, specifically Home Depot, just saying, because they do stock those quick dam products. I know that for a fact. Hey, just putting the plug in. So I work for this company, and we're partners in this, trying to help you be ready. Things like that, making sure your generator's up to snuff. Maybe you got one last year for Ian, didn't use it. Didn't even look at the owner's manual, maybe. I know some of you out there. I do it the same. Go on YouTube, figure it out. YouTube's got all kinds of helpful tips. But for real, all you need to do, instead of stressing, is turn that energy into action if you're in Florida, and just make sure you are ready. Again, turn it around and be selfish. What is this going to do for me in impacting my life, and what am I going to do about it? That's what I want you to think about. All right? All right, that's it for me for today. Have a great rest of your Thursday. I am Mark Sudduth. We are HurricaneTrack. We are a great community here. I appreciate all of you. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.